Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Wednesday workshop of the 2023 Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Series. My name is Dr. Jane Indorf, and I'm the manager of undergraduate and graduate programs with the Leadership Alliance. We have put together a terrific lineup of expert speakers for this summer's program, whom I know will be able to offer you sage advice and insight to research and the research career pathway. Today, our session on research and reflection features three outstanding faculty members and huge supporters of the Leadership Alliance. They'll be speaking today about research and the significance of reflecting on a research experience to help propel you forward in your career path. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our participants for submitting some really excellent and insightful questions ahead of time for our panelists to address today. Our panelists today are Dr. Winona Wynn, Professor of Humanities and Indigenous Studies at Heritage University, a small private liberal arts university located in eastern Washington state on the Yakima Indian Reservation. Dr. Oludurotimi Adetunji, Associate Dean of the College for Undergraduate Research and Inclusive Science and an Adjunct Assistant Professor of Physics at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. And Dr. Wallace Sharif, Assistant Professor of Biology and Biochemistry at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Now I'd like to turn it over to our speakers to further introduce themselves. Dr. Sharif, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wallace Sharif. As Jane said, I'm an assistant professor of biology at Morehouse College. I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about my career path because it's one of the things that came up. I was a chemistry major at Morehouse College a very long time ago, and went from there into biochemistry at Vanderbilt University. I originally wanted to study the effects of chemicals on the body, so kind of merging my chemistry and biology interest. I ended up doing something completely different, studying chromosome segregation during meiosis. After my PhD, I was trying to figure out kind of what step to go in next. And one of the things that really fascinated me was the idea that aging is a program of specific things that happen in the cell. And so in my mind, I thought if there's a program for aging, then we can devise interventions that might circumvent some of those programs. So I started looking into molecular mechanisms of aging. One of those possibilities are the telomeres, or the ends of the chromosomes. And so I engaged in a postdoc to study telomere biology and its effect on cellular aging in humans. And I took that ultimately back to Morehouse, where I wanted to look at some of these aging-related impacts on minority communities, and am now looking at the effects of stress on DNA and epigenetic modifications, as well as some pedagogical interests. So it's a pleasure to talk to you all. I'll be coming up at the end of the talk with some things about summer experience.
I'll go ahead and go next. My name is Winona Wynn. I am Professor of Indigenous Studies Humanities at Heritage University. We're located in eastern Washington state on the other side of the mountains from Seattle, on the Yakima Indian Reservation, and we're privileged to serve a population primarily of Mexican American students coming from Michoacan, a lot of them coming to work in agriculture with their parents and seeking education. And then we also serve the Yakima Nation, which is a federally recognized reservation in the Pacific Northwest, very powerful in their political advocacy for many traditional Native cultural protocols. And so I wanted to quickly touch on my research path as well, and connect it to one of the questions in the chat regarding humanities research with minority and underserved populations. And I want to say that community-based participatory action research is what we absolutely commit to on the reservation, with research ethical protocols that are in place to protect the sacred knowledge of the Yakima people and the people of the Pacific Northwest. I was also the IRB, the Internal Review Board chair for my university. I continue to be a voice in that community regarding ethical protocols as we work with any populations that are non-majority throughout the United States. And so I'm very involved in those conversations. And so I wanted to also say that a lot of our crossover work is relevant for science projects, and we do a lot of collaborative work. And so particularly as we begin to look at populations and what scientific knowledge already exists in Indigenous communities, we work with scientists in all facets to bring those relationships and those conversations together. So wonderful to be with you today. Thank you. I'll pass it on to my colleague over here who has not spoken yet.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Oludurotimi Adetunji, and I will also talk a bit about my career path. So I started out as a physics major at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And 2 years into my major, I decided to also dabble into computer science. And I ended up getting a double major in physics and computer science. However, I started doing research my very first semester at Fisk. And that actually opened my eyes to a lot of things that I never thought existed. So doing research very early for me was key in helping with my career path. So I started working in a lab, it's a material research lab, doing 2,6 material research. The focus of those research is we grew 2,6 material that we could dope and then develop infrared detectors using those 2,6 materials. And that inspired me a lot. By the time I was graduating, I already have 4 publications to my name, and that helped me to be able to then decide to go into my doctorate degree in physics. I decided to, I'm connecting this to one of the questions that was raised earlier about why did I decide to go into physics and not computer science? Well, it's pretty easy in my case because the research I was engaged in as an undergraduate was so inspiring to me, and I wanted to further pursue that line of thought in condensed matter physics. And then I did my PhD in studying conducting polymers, trying to understand how plastic can actually be used in electronic devices. Then from that, I worked with the government for some time in Navy Research Lab before I came back to the academy at Brown. And now I run the undergraduate research office at Brown, and I still I'm highly interested in getting science more accessible to a lot of people in the public. So I focus a lot of my scholarly work in science communication through a program known as SciTunes. If you all have, if you did the pre-work for this workshop, you probably saw one of our videos on what is research. So that's my career path, and I look forward to engaging with you all.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So Dr. Adetunji?
All right. Yeah, I could start by, so we're going to go through a couple of slides, and after we finish our presentation, there will be opportunity for you all to ask questions. So what do you think research is? So usually when you ask this question, depending on the context in which you're asking this question, you might get a variety of answers. But what is important is that you should always think about research as a process for discovering something new about the world. So if something is already known, that cannot really be research, because research is asking questions, trying to understand something that is not known, something that is new. And we would like to emphasize that research can be done by virtually anybody with any level of training. And so what do you want to do? Why do you want to do research? Well, why do you want to do research? So the main thing is that research seeks to understand answers to questions that are not known. But there is a process, there is something known as the research process. And the research process is sort of systematic approach by which research can be conducted depending on the fields that you are from, either in the humanities, social science, life science. There is this systematic approach that every scholar sort of follows, and that systematic approach allows them to be able to find answer to the question that if they are trying to solve. Next slide, please. So this research process has been well defined by a lot of people, but it's sort of like a loop, basically, whereby the first thing is that you have to think of an interesting question that you would like to ask. Then based on those questions, you can formulate an hypothesis, which is sort of like some form of guess that you're trying to use for your questions. Then based on that, you develop what is known as testable predictions. And then you can begin to gather data. As you're gathering data, you might begin to refine the kind of test and prediction that you're trying to make based on your initial data. Then from that, you could develop what is known as a general theory about your concept. Then you begin to make observation, and then you continue that cyclical loop. And as you're doing this, there might be a range of tools that you might need to be able to develop your research, to be able to answer the question you're trying to address. So sometimes the tools might be readily available. Sometimes they are not readily available. You might have to create it as part of your research process. Next slide. So, so thinking about the fact that as a researcher, you have this form of a researcher's approach. So the first thing is that you have this question based on your observation. You have to come up with a set of questions that you're trying to solve. These questions are typically things that are unknown. Then you apply the research process, the research protocol, and then you don't know the set of answer that you don't know the answer you're trying to answer, but you use all these tools that are available to begin to develop the process by which those questions could be answered. So ultimately, good researchers simply learn to ask the right set of questions, and then they apply tools that are readily available to them to address those questions, or they have to create some more additional tools. At this point, I will pass it on to my colleagues for the next slide.
So regarding observation, that's really a critical connection that the humanities and social sciences has with scientific research. So I wanted to make a point that when we are in our human lives in the everyday access to the world, we ask questions. If we see a junk car in a junkyard as we pass by and there's nothing around, and we ask a question as we go by in our car at 60 miles an hour. I wonder who drove that car. I wonder why it's there. I wonder who was in that car that was injured, or why isn't that car, is it legal to leave that car parked there for that long? So I just want to point out that observation is many times a human natural curiosity that was mentioned earlier, that you look and you ask questions and you form a hypothesis. And so that's really not too different than what we do in humanities and social sciences. And so if you put in the circle, if you put a topic, a general topic of interest, as you explore your topic, general topic that you want to address, like education, for example. You could put education in that circle, or you could put family in that circle. You could put political aspects of, ethical aspects of confinement, as in prisons, anything in that circle. You can look at it from a political standpoint, ethical, legal, economic, linguistic, historical, and all the way around the circle. And you could begin to limit or pare down your direction by saying, okay, I'm not interested in the personal part of this topic, but I am interested in historically, how did prisons become, how did they come into being? What does Foucault say about the beginning of prisons? What was the first prison in the United States, and why? What kind of philosophy did it hold for punishment? And so you can think, okay, I'm interested in the ethical, the political, and the legal possibilities of my topic. And so I just want to encourage everyone in the humanities and social sciences, and also beyond, because in our community we look at topics of farming, agricultural water purity, and that could be a political topic, ethical topic, economic, sacred, environmental. And so all of the topics that you have that you're thinking about forming a hypothesis for can be explored through these domains of thinking. And then what I do usually is pare that down. I know I'm going to have a chaotic paper or a chaotic approach if I try to cover everything. So I kind of think about what can I do to make it manageable for me. I'm starting from the point of observation, and then starting from the vantage point of how these things are most strongly applied to a topic of interest. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Sharif.
Hi, so we want to talk a little bit about how research works and then what the importance is. And I think it's important to note that all aspects of society can utilize the tools that we are trying to develop, and that hopefully you'll develop over the summer. And so we do this because we want to learn more about the natural world or human society. And research gives us the ability to ask questions that are of interest to us and explore those topics. And so you have a great freedom to explore these things. And as I'll say a little bit later, the tools that are developed either in this process are things that you can use regardless of what your career outcome ends up being. Regardless of whether you stay in sciences, or you stay in humanities, you go to business, you can utilize these tools that are being developed in your field. Next slide. So from the scientific point of view, we can use these things to really kind of change the world, right? Understand who we are as a people, and try and better our place in this world. The other kind of advantage of this type of work is that we don't work in isolation for the most part, and that we utilize teams, hopefully, who bring in their different expertise in order to make really transformative changes. And so there are some traits that are kind of necessary to be a good researcher. We've listed a few of them there. Curiosity about the world, the ability to view problems as opportunities and how to solve them. Obviously, you want to work on being creative and come up with new ways to solve problems, and be passionate about the work that you do.
I just wanted to add something here. Going back to what Dr. Adetunji said regarding government work or working outside of academia, that these things are applicable beyond the academic context, and also what Dr. Sharif said about becoming passionate about a certain topic and connecting to that topic. And so when I look at this list, sometimes I think that passionate, creative, and maybe those two specifically, and collaborative, don't really come to mind when I think in my limited way about scientific research. I'm thinking of someone isolated in a laboratory who has this authoritative person over them, and they have this time frame to come up with a cure or a solution or a progress on a particular study. And I love seeing this list because I think it makes us think differently about science and creates this interdisciplinary crossover between social sciences and humanities and science. We collaborate in all those fields with scientists to enhance a lot of projects. I was interested in this list particularly. Thank you. Dr. Atuni?
All right, so I can also add that when when we think of the list holistically, and you think about collaboration as a very good example, it's very important that if you look at the big problems that scholars are trying to solve right now, think about climate change as an example. It requires people from different backgrounds coming together to figure out how to solve those problems. So I believe that as the problems that we're trying to solve become more complicated over time, there will be need for us as scholars to collectively work together in order to solve those big problems. So who does research? Well, it's our hope that you will leave this forum to see that people that do research are not only people with lab coats working in the lab, but researchers could also people that are in business, social scientists, data analysts, humanists, they are also doing research, and they are also contributing to the knowledge base of the society. Next slide, please. So this slide, this section is focusing on reflecting on summer research experience. And I would like to say that as you, even though a lot of people reflect at the very end, it's also important before you even begin your research to think about a set of questions that will help you as you, before, during, and after your research to really have a full reflection over the experience that you have. So next slide. So, so when you think about reflection, you have to also think about observation. Like, okay, what are the set of things that you would like to observe before, during, and after this experience that will allow you to be able to have a full picture of what you actually did. So now I'll pass it on to Dr. Sharif.
Yeah, thank you. So we talked a little about what research is and maybe what it is not. We've seen that anyone can engage in this, and that you can take these skills that you developed in engaging in a research program and apply it to whatever your career is. And so, I tell my students, I really think that really being able to think critically and problem solve is almost like a superpower, and that it gives you skills of analysis that sets you apart from maybe the rest of society. And so, this is something that hopefully you engage in, throw yourselves into, and really come out changed as a person and as a thinker. And so this kind of next set is really about how to maximize that summer experience. I think I will come back at the end of the summer, particularly for those of us who are engaged in Leadership Alliance summer programs. I'll be at the kind of wrap-up conference lands, talking about this experience and really how to leverage your summer experience to get new career opportunities, to get scholarships, and kind of have it dictate your career goals. That's not the point of this particular talk. Here, we wanted to give you some prompts that you could think about as you engage in your first summer experience, so that you can maybe think of how the experience is impacting you and what it is that you want to take from this experience, so that you can determine your next steps in your life. And so in general, what we're going to talk about are really just a series of questions that I'd like for you to kind of jot down and think about as you engage in those experiences. And they're generally kind of along these lines. Why are you doing this work? What do you want to occur to you, right? In terms of both your professional outcomes and your personal and internal growth. And then, can you apply the skills that you develop, particularly if it isn't exactly in line with where you thought you wanted to be, to apply to your career goal. And I'll have Dr. Wynn pop in for a second. Oops. groups.
Okay, I just want to comment on the other slide, particularly the one that's research reflections. In addition to what Dr. Sharif was speaking to, what do we want you to get from the summer experience at Leadership Alliance? I think it's important to look at research, including these questions, but as a part of your new identity, a part of your identity that you're developing, that I see people that do research. I understand they're successful at research. I understand the pathways of these professors, Dr. Adetunji and Dr. Sharif and Dr. Wynn, and I want to be part of that group. And so the quicker you identify yourself, I am a researcher. This is an additional piece of my academic identity, my personal identity, how I look at the world, observation. I think that helps you gain confidence. And so I just wanted to make that maybe question number 5. How can I start to begin to relate to that identity of being a researcher? So the next slide, I'll comment on that just a little bit. As you reflect on your summer experience, was the work exciting to you? Also, along with that question, kind of the subtext is, did I enjoy working collaboratively with my peers? Did I really access the knowledge and the experience of my graduate mentor? Was I fully participating to make this work exciting for me? Did I discover things I didn't know before? Along with the question, could you envision taking the work in other directions? And for that, I would point back to Dr. Adetunji and say, work is applicable beyond the borders of the academy. I mean, we want you to be engaged in the academy, of course. Our goal is for you to go forward, get your PhD and work in various opportunities, but you can go back and then go out and then come back as well, that it's multiple opportunities, even within the academy for grants from federal sources and grants within the institution. So lots of opportunity for you to be on that other list, creative, passionate, collaborative, all those things work into this particular slide as well. And I'll pass that on to the next speaker. Dr. Sharif.
Sure. So when you're engaging in research, you're usually engaging in a group. And one of the things for you to determine is to what group dynamics work best for you. And every research group is different. They all have their own personality. You could be in a very large group. You could be in a very small group. You could have a principal investigator who is very involved in your day-to-day work. You could have one who's actually more laid back, and you might only see a few times over the course of your summer. And one of the things is to kind of figure out what works with your own learning and working style, and which one fosters the most amount of growth in you. Now, there might be one that's more comfortable for you, but it doesn't lead to your growth and development. So those are things to factor in. The other one is what type of institution you want to be in, whether it's a huge research institution or one that's smaller and maybe a little bit closer to the ground work of the things that you want to do. And lastly, take a look at the city. That's important in terms of whether you want to be in a big city, smaller city, rural, urban, or whatever. And so all of those things factor into the decisions that you make in the
I'm interested in Dr. Adetunji. What do you think, the last question, did the city suit you? If you could speak to, as a graduate student, were you able to get out and kind of have a break from the laboratory and the break from your research, or how would you interpret that last question?
So yeah, I think it's very important to if you have choice, for example. So I remember when I was applying to graduate school, I got into a multiple school. The question becomes, it's about the quality of this institution, but also where I'm going to be for the next couple of years. So it's important to make sure that, because you're not only going there to be a researcher, you're also going there to have life outside of research, to have a balance. So it's important to look for an environment that you can thrive, not only in your scholarship, but also outside of research or outside of the institution itself. So when you have an opportunity to apply to several undergraduate research, for example, you might also want to consider what is in it in the city that will help you as a human being to be able to thrive in what you're trying to do. So I think that is also important as part of the big picture.
Thank you. One more thing I just wanted to add to the, did you work in a big or small group, a close-knit or distant, micromanaging PI or absent one? We're asking you to practice the skill of observation here. So if you become aware of what you're doing and what's around you and how you might filter that through a systematic process of reasoning for yourself, you are practicing observation and deeply, and it's benefiting you. So begin observing when you enter into your research environment. Take that information and data in, and then come out with a hypothesis that will answer the other two questions for you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Sharif.
Yeah, and another thing to look at is just the work environment in terms of how the group likes to work. And again, there's a personality for all of these. Some, insist that you put in 14 hours a day. Some are much more laid back as long as the work goes through. Some of those work differently for different people. If you're given a lot of freedom, sometimes you're less productive, and maybe you need a little bit more structure in your program. And so, one, take a note of what the environment is like, and then two, take a note of what works for you that allows you to be productive, to learn, and also doesn't necessarily burn you out. And one way, it's very difficult to do this in a 10-week summer program, but one way to get at that information and really see how that would work for you is to talk to your lab mates and graduate students, postdocs, or senior undergrads who have had some experience in that laboratory to see what their experiences are and what they think is worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Adetunji referred to the work-life balance in his previous comments, and that was really important, talking about the city, where you want to live. He mentioned where you might want to live for the next period of time. So I thought that was really insightful and really important.
Next slide. And then, another thing to look at is your cohort. So if you're in an institution with 10 other people, or if there's an umbrella summer program, look around at those people, because there's likely that if you continue in this field, these are going to be your colleagues that you will see throughout the course of your career. And, a question to ask is whether this is your group. One of the things, as Dr. Wynn alluded to before, is that you're really searching for your identity and developing your identity as a researcher and as a human being. And these are people who are taking this journey with you. And so you should look to see whether, these are values that coincide with your own. Next slide.
Oh, for that slide we just passed, I just want to quickly comment and say, for the humanists and the social scientists, when you work with your peers, and you'll have opportunities also to consult with other scientists too, that are within a group of researchers that you may know from a particular institution. So I was at a accreditation body for the internal review board recently, and those people are not my people. They're a little different. They're more data-driven people in numbers and ways of looking at ethical protocols. Not that I'm interested in ethical protocols, but I thought they really did depend on conversation about culture. In my particular case, for Native American people, Indigenous people. And that could be a worldwide situation. So humanists, collaborating with scientists and other people in different fields, aside from humanities, is very important.
And certainly, and I think this is something that will come up in the question and answers, but that is the way in which all fields are going. There's convergence now, particularly with the emphasis on data analytics, in terms of the work, so that these collaborations between what were once thought to be disparate fields are going to be increasingly important. But we'll come to that. That's a little aside. Next slide. And so then, the interaction with your principal investigator or your mentor, how that works, and again, whether it works with your own learning style, as we talked about before. I have seen with students they come back and they say, well, I only saw my mentor twice. I was working with a postdoc, and even that is valid, and that's kind of the nature of things, depending on how the laboratory works, what's going on in the summer, and things like that. So that is not something immediately to be disappointed about, provided that you have somebody to engage with over the course of the summer who has.
One quick interjection is that Leadership Alliance, the website, has wonderful, wonderful guidance, how to be a good mentee, and also what to expect from your mentor. And we've all shared that, I'm sure, with our students and our summer research groups time and again. So be sure to look at that, because how to be a good mentee is really important. And they have really clear information on the website, we do, that's very relevant to how you might want to process your mentoring experience.
I would also like to add that when you think about mentoring, you should not only focus solely in your relationship with your PI. There are other people within the research group. It could be other students, it could be your peers that are helping you with a particular research protocol. It could be other graduate students, it could be postdoc, it could be other people from other lab that is close by, that is connected to the kind of work you're doing. So it's important to think about mentoring mosaic, so that you're not just, so that you can expand your network of people that could help support you during this, as you do your research itself.
We can borrow the term from Johns Hopkins, who does a humanities research program called the collaboratory. So I thought that's a good term, and we can stretch that to apply to what Dr. Adetunji just said, that the collaboration is important. So collaboratory, and we'll go both directions.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to move kind of quickly so that we can have time to get to questions. But typically in research, particularly over a summer program where you just have one project, there might be a lot of downtime, and really kind of question how to use that downtime to still be productive and learn and grow in this experience. So just kind of making sure that you understand that that's there and how to do that. And I'll say, one thing in research is that if everything works, then maybe you aren't being ambitious enough, right? And so that's one maybe difference that many other career fields don't really kind of wrestle with, is that we fail many, many, many more times in this work than we kind of have this breakout aha moment. And so you have to be comfortable not only with failing, but with learning from those failures to get to that success. And it is, I think that might be one of the biggest transitions that you have to make going from an undergraduate career in which you're, if you want to go on, you're typically generally successful, to a graduate or kind of higher level career, is to be comfortable with the failure and knowing that failure brings growth with it down the line. And one of the biggest things I think that probably we've all gone through is that when you're in the weeds, when you're in it, it's very hard it's difficult to see the growth. And you do have to pull back a little bit to really show yourself that you've grown as a critical thinker and as an analyst before. And that kind of flips to the next slide, which I think pretty much.
Sorry, Dr. Cherry.
Yes.
Can I add to what you just said in the last slide? So failure, it's something that happens to us all, and it's important for young scholars to know that, yeah, everybody has failed at some point during their career or as they're doing research. One thing I would like to say though is that there is a huge difference between what I call intelligent quotient and emotional quotient. Your intelligent quotient, if you're really smart, I mean, your schoolwork, you can get all A's because you just studied and you pass. But when you start doing research, you're trying to solve a problem that nobody has an answer. And a lot of time it's not like it will just work, right? So your emotional quotient is important to be able to be focused, to be determined that you're not going to give up. You will keep doing all you can to get to a way to solve the question at hand. So I just want you to know that that would be a very valuable toolkit for you to have as you develop as a scholar.
Mhm. I just want to add to really quickly to that, I love this about scientists, that they feel that, well, they know that failure is narrowing the field of what they want to have happen in their question. And it narrows the focus in a way that makes it very much more possible to get into the nitty-gritty of what they really want to discover. So failure is really a positive process, and failure is progress. And I think that humanists don't grasp that as well as scientists do. And so thank you both for bringing that forward. I really appreciate that. It's really important framework that failure is actually progress.
And there was one of the questions that we've kind of seen already is kind of, how do you know when to call it? And that's a really, really difficult question to ask, particularly if you spend a long time, working at something. I mean, it's, to this day, I struggle with that. So that's a hard question to come through. I'll say, in this maybe last slide, what we work for in research is that aha moment, and so to have that, success, I will say for many of you over the summer, that won't come until like, 2 hours before you leave for your conference to do the presentation. You'll be amazed at how much happens in the last couple of days before you have to present the work. But you really should take note of that feeling when you actually kind of look and see what you've accomplished over the course of the summer and kind of say, is this, enough for me? Is this, do I, now that I see everything that I've done, is this really something that I want to pursue? And just check in with yourself as you're doing it. As we said in the beginning of this kind of section, a lot of times, particularly as undergraduate students, we're running so much. We go right from one thing to the next, the next, the next. And we don't give ourselves the space to really just breathe, process, think about the experience that you just had and really let it change you and allow you to grow. And so we want to give the room for you to, one, kind of recognize that this is going to happen, and then two, really learn how to incorporate that into your identity, as Dr. Wynn and Dr. Adetunji related to.
I appreciate that so much, because you're saying, accept the process and value the process and the relationship that you're building with the process, and that can be applied in other ways, or that can step outside the particular individual experience that you didn't find was exactly what you wanted to do. But the process is always valuable. And in Native community, relationship building is sacred. And so that relationship you have with yourself, with your peers, with the collaborative piece of it, and with the science itself, or the whatever you're studying, is really an important and valuable piece. So thank you for bringing that forward, Dr. Sharif.
And I think just the last slide, many of us over the summer, particularly in programs like Leadership Alliance, you might come in saying, you die hard want to do neurobiology, and then you end up in a human genetics lab or something like that. And so even if the work isn't what you thought it would, it was, what you wanted it to be, you can really take the experience and either apply it to the work that you do want to do, or allow yourself to grow and see other possibilities that are there. I'll say, as I kind of alluded to in the beginning, my own experience, I thought I was going to do toxicology and pharmacology. I knew it until I got to grad school and realized I hated neurobiology, and that is kind of what pharmacology is in many ways. And so I went in a different way because I was open to new possibilities. And so take this experience, regardless of what it is, and allow that to influence your next steps going forward.
And Dr. Adetunji, could you revisit what you said about career options, because you were in the government sector, and how that impacted you?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the beauty of being a scholar is that you will develop critical skills that is applicable in any form of sector. So the ability to write well, the ability to collaborate with others, the ability to think critically, problem solving, These are all vital skill sets that government, academia, nonprofits, industry, they are all looking for this kind of skill set. So it's important that as you're engaged in research, you are also developing this critical skill sets along the way, because these are tools that it doesn't matter what you want to do in the future, those tools, those skill set is going to help you. So in my case, I work with the government as during part of my career, and the skill set that I learned there, part of it was what I'm still using up to today. The skill set that I brought with me to work in the federal lab, as I'm still using some of them till today. So just know that research is so critical for you to develop vital skill set that will help you whatever you choose to do in the future.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say, if only I had had all of this information up front when I was just starting out with my undergraduate research, I feel like I would have been much better equipped. So thank you. Okay, so we have some time for questions, and there were some really great, insightful questions that were submitted ahead of time. So I'm going to go into some of those. So Dr. Adetunji, how broad are the opportunities in pursuing a career in physics as opposed to pursuing a career in computer science?
Well, I mean, as a physicist, I believe physicists can do anything. They can dabble into anything. So it's kind of limitless, basically, because you're able to study a lot of physical science related concepts. You also learn a lot of maths, and along the way, you learn a lot of coding. So that really will allow you to be able to explore pretty broad area of opportunity in the future. So someone did ask me at some point, why did I choose between physics and computer science? Well, as I alluded to earlier on, I started in physics. I decided to do computer science as a way for me to learn how to program and apply those skill sets to my actual research. But those skill sets were skill sets that are helpful for me in my physics career. So I decided to continue in physics because this was during the dot-com boom while I was in school. And when I was graduating was the dot-com collapse, and there was no job opportunity for folks in CS. And I said, you know what? I better just stick with my physics rather than get out there when I might not get a job. But ultimately though, I think it's important to, if you don't know how to decide between both areas, I will encourage you to do an internship related to CS and then do research related to physics, then decide on which one you want to choose.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Sharif, which particular cellular and molecular mechanisms of aging really captured your interest?
So, I came in from DNA. One thing, I actually am a cellular molecular biologist. I don't like thinking outside the nucleus. So, I can't even begin to fathom like tissue systems and things like that. So I like the changes in DNA over the course of cellular aging. And really, one of the kind of really exciting things that have come out in the last maybe 10 years is kind of this separation between chronological age and biological age. So the idea, and we can measure that in terms of changes in the DNA. And so this idea that we could really determine what environmental factors really affect your biological age versus simply, this arbitrary metric that we've had, in the past, which is time. So I think that's really fascinating. And one of the things, just talking about interdisciplinarity, is that it allows me to also think about societal factors, right? If we develop things that, I don't really talk about increasing lifespan, but increasing health span, right? Who has access to that? I mean, right now there's somebody, I'm going on a tangent, but he's spending $2 million a year, right, to optimize his body, this kind of silicon tech bro, to develop these protocols to optimize his body to limit, his biological age, who has access to that technology, right? And so those are things that we can think of as well.
Thank you. Dr. Wynn, how did you begin pursuing cultural studies research, and what activities do you engage in for your fieldwork? For example, interviews, language studies, etc.
Mm-hmm. So I'm an enrolled member of my tribe, which is Assiniboine Fort Peck in Montana on the reservation. So I work with my relatives in Yakima. I have relatives, my dad's side of the family in Yakima. So I'm lifelong interest in cultural exploration. I grew up around the world. My father was a 30-year Air Force veteran. So I participate in participatory community action research, where I engage people in historical recounting of assimilation and historical occurrences that impacted Native people, but it rolls into environmental, political, ethical, and also sacred knowledge, which is Indigenous ways of knowing. And so that continues to revitalize me every time I talk to an elder, which is an interruptive process for the United States when they were assimilating people, separated families from each other. It encourages me to know that kind of knowledge exists worldwide in Indigenous communities. Worldwide, elders are the knowledge keepers. They carry the burden. They carry the knowledge of sacred knowledge of survival and sustaining us on the earth, all of us. So I'm just continually fascinated by the intergenerational trauma, overcoming that, and then working in focus groups, as you said, but mostly storytelling in small groups, dialogical, where they're talking to a younger person, giving advice and that kind of thing, and then coding that into an acceptable project that is approved by tribal council and various entities within the tribes that I work with.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for at least one more question, and this is for all of our panelists. What key steps can junior researchers or researchers such as undergraduates just starting out, what steps can they take to develop effective research and reflection skills in their respective fields?
Quickly, I would just refer them to the Google site, where we have these wonderful resources available, from the SciTunes to the observation aspects of what it takes to be a scientific researcher. So I'm all about deep observation and critical dialogical observation, and then coding from there, either informally or formally, taking notes.
I think one thing is kind of really being intentional about your actions and the work. So understand why you're there. Understand, you might decide in a week or two that, hey, this isn't for me, but understanding that you can still learn and grow from the process and take that to what is for you, right? So, instead of kind of allowing things to happen, to really being intentional about making the most of this experience and committing to growing from it is really important.
Yeah, and I would just add that be fully engaged, be fully present in the experience, because that's really important, and take as much that you could learn from that, and the toolkits that you learn from that, you could take it to other opportunities in the future. So be fully present.
Okay.
I second that.
And one last question. If you end up feeling really mixed with parts of your research, like you love some parts and you didn't enjoy others, how do you figure out what an okay balance is, and what's indicative that research may not be the best career path for you?
Yeah, that's kind of another thing where kind of learning that and kind of figuring out what you do like and what you don't really is something that would be a huge win from your experience. So let's say, I'm a scientist, so kind of looking through, you have some wet bench work and you have some programming work that all data analytics work. right? You might hate the data analytics, but really like the bench work. Well, now you know kind of what direction that you want things to go, at least for your next experience, right? And so understanding that, you know, kind of taking those pieces that you like and thinking, well, what can I do with this to help me get to the next goal? And then lastly, just kind of, you know, always keep in mind, you know, don't think of things in terms of the career, think of things in terms of the problems that you want to solve, right? What good do you want to do for the world? And then go back and say, well, how can I accomplish that? Right?
All right, thank you so much. I just wanted to say that a lot of the questions that have been submitted are going to be addressed in our next session. Next Wednesday, we are going to be having a panel on finding your scholarly identity. So how do you figure out what you're interested in and what direction do you want to go with your career and your research interests? So thank you very much to our panelists. I've even learned something today. And please tune in next week for our Wednesday workshop on finding your scholarly identity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you.